Now, what if your business could be as exciting and strategic as playing your favorite board game? Well, stick around because today we're going to show you how.
Welcome to Fortify Live with your host, Ford Saeks.
Joining me today is Igor Vainshtein. He's a best-selling author, a serial startup entrepreneur and enthusiast, and he's the creator of EntrepreNopoly, which I probably didn't pronounce right, but we're going to talk about it today. But it's a board game that turns the highs and lows of running a business into a fun, strategic adventure. Igor, welcome to the show today. First, how do you pronounce the board game?
Yeah, you actually got the board game right. It's EntrepreNopoly.
Okay, EntrepreNopoly.
So you got it. It starts rolling off your tongue after you do it like 10 times.
Well, I've been an entrepreneur since I was 12 years old. It's always been one of those words that I can spell, but my team has challenges sometimes. But before we get into the board game, I mean, you and I met because we talked about content marketing and using AI and strategic. And I just love talking to you because we're both critical thinkers, open-minded, and coachable. So for those listening today, we are live right now on Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, and a few other places. So regardless of what your role in the business is, whether you're a business owner, an entrepreneur, a franchise brand, or maybe a private equity group, it's going to be relevant. So how did you get started as an entrepreneur?
Well, actually, you started when you were 12, right? I actually, my story goes back to like when I was 7, and growing up in communist USSR, and I was at a school camp and went to the beach, and I hated the beach at the time. This is before I grew up in Australia, right? So it was in Ukraine, Sevastopol, port city, infamous now with the war, but I hated the beach, so I found a reason to bring like bottled water. Like I filled up the water, found bottles, filled it up with water. I went to the beach, sold it because there was no, there's no vending machines. In Soviet Russia, right? You're on your own, and so that was technically my first ever business, as far as I can remember. And I got into trouble. But the funny part is, when we got back to my hometown, Chisinau, which is Moldova. My parents got hauled into the Communist Party headquarters, and they were seriously reprimanded, saying that they're raising a bourgeoisie pig. The brainwashing was strong back in the 80s still. This is before the wall came down, really. But they were very proud, and so they wanted to get the hell out. And then just relevant to the board game, because I just want to mention that. So funnily enough, Monopoly was released in USSR in '88. And
really?
so
I was wondering about that.
Right, and they had like Moscow, the main streets in Moscow on the games. I got the game, I loved it, and I got these 2 other games. And then the funny story is, like, think about this, like me, 8 years old, 9 years old in communist, USSR, as the wall's coming down. And then I was playing these games, but I just couldn't make enough money. So I actually wrote my first ever board game when I was like almost 9 years old back in Soviet Union, because I just wanted to like get this infinite loop and like combine all the cash from all the games and just make more money. So I think that was like an interesting, sign of things to come, I guess.
Well, certainly
we moved to Australia about a year later.
I know when I talk to clients, I always tell people, if they ask me, well, what represents you in a nutshell? And I say, add value, make a profit. And some people are saying, like, well, Ford, it's not all about the money. I just want to make the world a better place. Look, I want to make the world a better place too. Like and if you want to make more money, which there's no shortage of money for first of all, and I know some of you will put in the comments, I don't agree, but there's no shortage of money. There's only shortage of adding value. So if you want to make more money, add more value. And instead of asking why it won't work, ask how it could work. So be open-minded, be coachable, be a critical thinker. That's certainly what I got rewarded, because as a young kid, I was, grew up in the projects. I was kind of a bad kid, and I was making money, not how everybody today should be making money back then. And I learned that when I took care of customers, and I actually, had several businesses, then people started to give me positive attention as opposed to negative attention. And then I was like, wow, I'm really going to learn how to do this. My first business, I was 15 years old. That was a real solid business. It made over $1 million. I was 15 years old, kid from the projects, and I created a painting company, and I had 3 crews working for me. Their average age was 40 years old, because I found that they didn't want to, all they wanted to do, Igor, is drink and paint. They didn't really want to get the business. So I would go out and get the business, and then I would take 40% and give them 60%. And so that's really how I started, which was selling, door to door, knocking on doors, looking for rundown houses and doing interior and exterior painting. And then that led to light construction, and that led to my first business. And that was when I didn't know what the word entrepreneur meant, but I certainly understand gamification. And years later, it's a big thing now. Everybody talks about gamification. But teaching concepts, games, and interaction, people learn by doing, right? So let's transition a little bit into this game. Where can people find it, and what is it about, and how does it help entrepreneurs, accelerate their growth?
I appreciate that. So, the game, if you can spell it, is entrepreneurpoly.game is the URL. Now, if you can't spell it, I did create a shorter domain name called biz.game, biz.game. Because sometimes you just want to type it in quickly, right?
Yes, right.
And obviously, and there is a, you can buy the game on there. It ships worldwide, etc. But I will also just put out there, talking about making the world a better place. If anyone A, can't afford it, B, has a great non-for-profit they want to donate the game to, reach out to me on the website. It's free. I'll send it to whoever you nominate. I'm on a mission to donate 1,000 of these games. I've just been to Bali, Indonesia. There's a amazing guy who started the school just in his backyard. Now he's got 250 kids. He's teaching them entrepreneurship, local Indonesian kids. And so we donated a couple of games there, and Jakarta, and, all over Australia, US, etc. So India, talking to Kenya, Ghana, anyway, you get the point. So the game's there, and really the idea came to me. Actually, funny enough, you talk about all these businesses that you've had, and love the story. Similar thing to me. I kind of learned the whole sales thing by accident. That oh wow, I'm actually good at it, and oh wow, I actually really like it. And now, even like going into like a shop and like haggling is like a sport to me. I love it.
Right.
It's a lot of fun. I think I've taught my kids how to sell from a very young age, because I think that's really the main skill in life is sales, because it's influence, it's getting your ideas sold, getting your whether you're in into relationship or a business or a friendship, whatever, it's all about sales. So digression there a little bit, but the game came to me as an idea from two things. One, I was really inspired by Robert Kiyosaki's board game, if you know it, Cash
I
Flow
had that
101.
years ago.
Me too. So I used to play when I was like 19, 20, going back 25 years ago, giving away my age there. And I really enjoyed it, and I learned a lot of things. And it kind of started me on a path of buying property and renovating property, and that's how I made my first fortune. Before I lost everything. And back in 2007, sort of in the middle of I went up. I had a very successful consulting business, which then wasn't so successful, and the global financial crisis hit, and I was going through this weird sort of transition in my life. And I had this idea of creating a board game with the experience I've had, because by then I was 27, but I already had lost 2 fortunes, maybe 3, I can't remember now. But I've gone up and down, and I thought, that experience has taught me so many things. I wish I could just share it with the world a little bit more, but I wasn't ready. I didn't feel I had the success. I thought to myself, I had massive, it wasn't even imposter syndrome. It was like pre-imposter syndrome. It was, why would anyone want to know what I have to say when, I saw myself as a failure? And then it wasn't until a couple of years ago when I, moved to the US, sold my company, had the success I always dreamt about. And I thought, I'm going to dust off this game. And I went and actually hired a great team to redo it, to modernize it, to add all these new experiences that I've had in these 15 years since, and also the people I read about. I used to absolutely, digest massive amounts of business biographies. I love reading about entrepreneurs and their stories. But as you said, it's a very one-way learning experience. With the game, I thought, what? People could actually experience what I experienced. I'll give you an example. There's a card, one of my favorite, there's like 5 different cards you can pick up. One of them is called Encounters. And that is one of my favorite because it's people you meet that have an impact on your life, business, positive or negative. And so when we met by chance, right, that's an encounter that I go, wow, what a great, opportunity for me to meet someone so amazing, another entrepreneur, etc. And that's, I wanted to kind of portray that in the game, But there's a card in there that also reflects the opposite, which is, I met this guy who I thought was going to be my mentor. He seemed to have this very successful IT managed services business, had a Ferrari, blah, blah, blah. It turned out he was a con man. And he fleeced me for $100,000. Right. So there is a card in there that literally says, you meet someone who you think is going to be your mentor, but they actually steal 100,000 from you. And you have to deal with it. And by the way, that's another card that's in the game, is deal with it. Right. Because, as entrepreneurs, as life, right? Stuff happens. You just got to deal with it. You can't,
Yes,
complaining about it is not going to change it. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I was going to beat myself there. So that experience of what are you going to be like? What are you going to do when things happen? That you can only get in an interactive, as you said, gamified way as a simulation. But the other thing, people ask me, are you going to make an app out of it? And I'm like, hell no. No, because what I want people to sit around a table, maybe with a glass or bottle of wine, and actually experience it, and with other people. Because so many entrepreneurs are lonely. They experience all this loneliness through the career. And I don't know if you've had it.
100%.
I certainly have. Right. And
Yep.
I want people to have that conversation like you and I are having now, but in that spirit of hey, I've just lost my fortune. What am I going to do? What would you do in my position? And wheel and deal at the table, and just get those reps up, right? Get the reps up of decision making. I think that is one of the things that we as entrepreneurs get so good at, is making decisions, learning from bad decisions, making better decisions in the future. You iterate that, and that's really the secret to success.
Yeah, I think it really is. For me, you read a lot of biographies. I've led thousands of business books, and sometimes I scan them and sometimes I read them. I've been to countless events, and you and I are both in entrepreneurs organizations, so we're around critical thinkers and entrepreneurs all the time. And I think in business, even our listeners today, whether you're listening on the Business Girl Show podcast or on Fortify Live, people are good in one of three areas: marketing and sales, so they understand how to create opportunity and provide value and improve the customer experience, or they're good at whatever the product or service is. So whatever, like if I'm a keynote speaker, it's member value. If I'm for my agency, it might be building someone's digital footprint. So it's delivering the product or service. Or number three, the bucket is operational, which covers culture, leadership, management, team building, communication, and change. So there's these three different buckets and modalities. Entrepreneurs have to wear many hats, and they have to be strong. They're usually strong in one or two areas for sure, not all three. No one's ever strong in all three. I don't care who you are. I can find, you can say, oh, I'm strong in all three. Now I am strong in all three from the fact that I've self-educated myself, but I spend more time in the marketing and sales bucket, which is why I'm known as a business growth guy, because I'm always looking at what's the shortest path between your value proposition and your customer. How can we add more value? How can we communicate? I always tell people, if they have a shortage of business, it's not because their product or service isn't good. In most cases, it's that they're a secret and they're not communicating it. And that the whole purpose of marketing and sales is just giving people enough information that they can make good decisions, right? So it's that marketing piece. Yeah. Well, for years, Igor, I kept having turnover in my business. I had a sporting goods company, it was $50 million, at 140 employees. And I had a lot of turnover, and I didn't understand why. And I was in one of my mastermind meetings, and this person said, well, you're complaining about all your employees for your different companies. Who's always at the scene of the crime? What's the one common denominator? It's you. And they said, look, you need to work on your leadership. And I'm like, I'm an entrepreneur. So I had to learn the differences of operations and culture and the different personality styles. And you can even hear it in the tone of voice when I say it, because it's like I have a dominant intent. How do we get it done? Well, that's not the intent of everybody else. Some people have an intent of how do I socialize and have fun? Some have an intent of how do I get along? That's not my primary question. I don't ever have that thing run through my head. How do I get along? Now, I want to add value, and I want to do it in an authentic way, but I don't naturally think of that. In fact, my personality profile actually says Ford believes in win-win. If he can't get win-win, he's okay with win-lose. So it's not the best way to be. But if there's anything I've learned, the more I've learned, the more I've read, the more I know that I know what I don't know, right? I'm very open-minded to what I don't know. And what I like about what you've got with this game is that you're giving opportunity for people, and I'm glad you haven't turned it into an app. I think it's really important to have situations. I think even more going forward now that with AI everywhere, and you and I have talked about AI and automation and workflows. I think what's going to happen is as the pendulum swings to high tech, doing high touch like your game is going to be highly important because it's about the face-to-face, toe-to-toe communication experiences, and your board game gives them the opportunity to get those mental reps in to address situations maybe in a board game that might save them thousands or even hundreds of thousands of dollars because they hadn't had a chance to experience in that live. So it's much better to learn by other people's experience than by making a mistake in business.
Absolutely. And with AI, there are certain things I think that will be quickly replaced by AI. Some will be slowly replaced by AI. But there are certain things that I think, AI is just not, it's just not there for this, which is, I mean, there's some dystopian movies that show it, which is, where there's so much empathy in AI that they become those, better human connections than humans. But I think that human connection is so pivotal to our being that is something that you can't really outsource, right, to AI. That skill, I think, and I talk about it as influence, as sales, as charisma, as being confident around people, as being understanding people, not just through data, but through that emotion and the connection. Those skills are going to be absolutely some of the most valuable skills, I think, because the way I see with AI, and this is an interesting digression, but I talk about it a little bit. What AI does as a co-pilot is like raise the level of high performance to such a great level, right? The gap between a high performer and average or low performer is going to widen and continue to widen, but just magnitudes, right? Because of this co-pilot AI thing. But again, if you have that human ability to, the human touch ability, that human skill, that co-piloting of the AI is only going to amplify those abilities. And even as an entrepreneur, like if you have those skills that you build through gamification, I'd say, and then you've heard people talk about it, right? There's going to be a one-person billion-dollar company because a one-person entrepreneur can have 10, 20 AI agents, AI co-pilots that can literally lift create $1 billion of value through that ability. But it's not AI alone; it is as co-pilot, I think, to a great entrepreneur.
Yeah,
I think that's
it's
coming.
true. And going back to your game, I want you to think about the people who've played the game. What's one piece of unexpected feedback or insight that you got after having the game out in circulation and people using it? What's something that totally surprised you?
Well, it was actually, funnily enough, the thing that really put a big smile on my face, pleasant surprise, was actually during playtesting. So as you develop a game, you run multiple rounds of playtesting, kind of like customer focus groups or whatever, right? And you get feedback and you try to improve. And about on the third playtest, I had a group of young people that were playing it, and at the end of it, they kind of put pens down and they're like, "Look, we want to give you some feedback. Like this game's really hard, and we thought it's going to be making deals and negotiating and this, but it's really more about financial management, risk management, and really surviving tough times." And I laughed and I said, "Welcome to the real world."
That's right.
Right? Entrepreneurship is getting punched in the face on a daily basis, getting up and doing it all over again tomorrow. This colored version of entrepreneurship is in the movies, and happy movies. It's not reality. And so having that feedback when they were like kind of complaining about it, it was like the best feedback I could have gotten, because I wanted people to experience the real, I talk about the real highs and the real lows. Like that's what not this rose colored, things are, they're going to be just, easy and fun. And you're going to, I call it the Instagram entrepreneurship, right?
Right.
It ain't
right.
private jets and champagne, right? That's not what it is, right? If you think that's what it is. Absolutely, right. Good luck, right? But so I wanted so having that feedback of being very real gave me a really huge inspiration to continue and share it more and more with the world, because I think that's what entrepreneurs, especially new entrepreneurs, I think that's what they need, is reality check, but then ability to use that reality check to get better. Because just thinking that it's all going to be Instagram worthy is not going to make you a successful entrepreneur. It's going to give you false hope. You're going to crash and burn, and you'll probably give up. And that's not what I want. I want
Yeah,
people to succeed.
it's so true. It's just like a lot. I've hired a lot of employees and I've trained them, and it's interesting, because my keynote fee is 25 grand, and I've had employees work for me that go, I don't understand. You can speak for 2 hours and make what I make in a year. Let's say their salary is 50 grand. I'm like, look, they're not paying me for the time. They're paying me for the decades of experience, the mistakes, the tuition that I paid in millions of dollars of mistakes and making money, like you said. And you and I throw terms around like, well, I lost my first fortune. And, most people look at that and they're like, are you crazy? Right. They can't even comprehend that. And I think it's really comes down to that, because I know, in my early days, I was about 16 years old by the time I got my first million in my painting company. And I was all excited because I'm a kid from the projects, 9th grade education, no parents, no money. So I was telling everybody I'm a millionaire. I'm a millionaire. And my accountant at the time said, hold on there, Skippy. You sold $1 million. You took home $16,000 as a salary, and you're $150,000 in debt. Sales is not profit, right? It's not what you sell, it's what you keep. And it was a really hard lesson for me to understand. And that's when they started talking about inventory turns and average transaction and key performance indicators and balance sheets and income statements and cash flow statements. And I'm like, I don't know what any of that is. It's like, I have money in the bank. I don't understand. Why do I need that? And I think as entrepreneurs, and this goes back to those 3 buckets, if you're going to be successful as an entrepreneur, you have to hire your weakness, but you need to have competency in all 3 buckets. You need to make sure you're delivering the product or service to top quality through your channels of distribution. You need to make sure that you're clear on your marketing, because it's a very noisy world out there. And how do you stand out when there's so much noise? You need to make sure you know how to build relationships. You need to hunt and you need to farm. You need to hunt for new business, but you need to nurture and farm the relationships you currently have. And then, of course, in the operational side, that's where the whole thing started at the top with culture, then leadership, then management, then team building, then communication, then how do you deal with change? And the organizations that I go into, that I speak to, and the clients that I work with, the first thing I do is I do an assessment of those 3 buckets. And it's amazing, even at the companies that make hundreds of millions of dollars, that they're missing the basic components because they've done something really well and they've grown. It's just like a client will come to me when I'm redoing their digital footprint, and they're like, well, I get all my business based on referrals, and they're really proud and they're pounding their chest. And I'm like, look, referrals are great. Centers of influence are great. It's great to get business from other centers of influence. But the reason you only get business from referrals is because all of your other marketing sucks. You're right. There's your website isn't clear. You have any search engine rankings. You don't show up on your keywords. You don't have anything other than the fact that you've done great. So, checkbox, I'm glad they delivered great products and services. But if they want to scale, they need to learn from playing a board game like yours, all the different things that they haven't even thought of. So for me, it's, like I said, the scariest people that I know are the people who think they know everything, but don't know what they don't know. So I like to be surprised.
Yeah.
That's the reason I do this show for Fortify Live. Meet great guests with you. You're going to share certain insights. I'm going to take notes. I'm like, you know what? I need to go back and look at that. And that's really what it is as experts, you and I are both helping people be a catalyst, and you created a board game where they can experience it without having to necessarily spend the money, other than the money for the board game, which is nominal compared to what it'll give you.
Oh, exactly. And actually, so going back to a point you made earlier, and I haven't articulated yet, but the game, you really play the game through a balance sheet and an income statement. So part of the game is also financial literacy. And that was that feedback to that I was mentioning,
Right.
that they were like, wow, we've learned so much about financial literacy. We thought it'd be more like wheeling and dealing. And, and that's the thing. Like if you don't have the basics, if you don't have the financial literacy, you ain't going to be doing much wheeling and dealing. You're going to be broke. And that is not a statement of judgment. That is a statement of experience. That's where I have been, because you're right. The 3 buckets. I love people. I love sales. I love leadership. I love building teams. I suck at operations. I suck at financial management. I hire great people to supplement those. You have to know yourself, and this is part of the game. It's part of, you and I, we've spoken about this. This is what, you and I talk about when we do keynote. It's one of the things that we talk about is just that self-awareness. Building that self-awareness creates the vision you need to find how to optimize the opportunities you have by filling those gaps, the weaknesses, with great people with great skills, and focusing on your strengths. To, let's say for me, it's like hunting, for example, is one of my skills, right? One of my strengths, and I love it. It's like a sport. Financial management, God no, complete opposite.
No, I'm the same boat, and I think it's very important for those listeners understand that you can be successful from your different, but you have to. I don't believe in making your weaknesses strong. Obviously, I want you to have education, but I really want you to figure out what you're really great at. Focus your time and energy there. That's how the question you should ask is this the highest and best use of my time? And then if so, do it. Now, I end up doing a lot of things, like I've been working on make.com, doing my workflows on, because I want to understand it. So when I hire somebody, I know what they're doing, right? And because I speak on the topic, it makes sense for me to be, clear on what the different tools are. Like right now I'm playing with Notebook LM, which is crazy. Oh, yeah. So I uploaded a bunch of my content to Notebook LM, created a bunch of podcasts using their tool, downloaded the podcast, uploaded them to a company program called Veed.io, like Video, Veed.io.
Yep.
And I was able to create content that is really good podcast type content. It's kind of scary, actually. And now I've got different pieces of content that I can put that are faceless on social media to help communicate the value of my new book. But the whole point is, what are you really strong at? What do you need to excel at? And for a business, do a report card and rate yourself on a scale of 10 on the different modalities. And then whatever isn't a 10, then you have that gap, and that lets you know who should I hire. And that's really the biggest thing I learned is, hire slow, fire fast. I've usually done it the opposite. I've hired fast and fired slow. It's like, because I want to help everybody. It's like, I can train that person. And 6 months later, I wasted, $100,000. And I'm like, what the hell was I thinking? And everybody else was like, I told you to let that person go. And I'm like, yeah, I know. But because so many people have given me help during my life where I failed, that I just assumed everybody had the growth mindset. And unfortunately, I'm sure you found that some people aren't intrinsically motivated. They're just looking to do the least amount of work and get paid the most amount of money.
But they also may not be in the right place. I have this story that I had a guy who worked for me in Australia, right? And his name is Eric. And, he was teaching in Australia when I had the indoor golf center. And then he was from the US, from Ohio. And then I hired him in the US when I expanded the business. And he was a great coach. He was, a great performer and a good person. And he was with me for about 3 or 4 months. And I'm like, man, it's just not working out. And I had this conversation. I said, listen, you're a great guy, but this is just not your role. Like, this is not what you do. And I said, you should go back to teaching, I think. And, it was hard. And he just had a newborn. Like, it was a really hard conversation. And I felt bad, but I knew in my heart, like, this is really not working out for him or for me, right? Anyway, I run into him a year later at the PGA show. And, and he's like, oh, hey, guess what? Like, I got flown out here by the PGA of America because I put up in a hotel, all this stuff. Because in that year, he became the #1 booked coach in the state or something like that. And he's like, and he said to me, firing me was the best thing you did for me.
Nope, I agree.
He's doing so well right now. And obviously that's an outlier story, but it happens. Those things happen when you're in the right place, doing the things that, feeding your strengths, right? And that made me feel great. I mean, I knew that he was going to be better off being in that position. I didn't know he was going to be this much better off. But this is what you also have to realize is sometimes you're holding people back by not actually making the decisions that they're not brave enough to make. He should have quit. He knew he wasn't working, right? He wasn't surprised when I had that conversation with him. But most people, non-entrepreneurs, making big life decisions like that is really hard. And again, going back to the entrepreneurship, I think what makes it so kind of almost blasé for me is we have to make so many decisions every single day. And, look at my entrepreneurial career of 25, 30 years. I've made, I don't know, millions, and you probably have as well, like millions and millions of decisions. For us, it's just normal. Most people do not have that normal. And so it's scary. And sometimes we have to, be, that person, that catalyst for them to make the decisions, for them, help them. It's not such a bad thing.
Yeah. I always tell people, if you're sitting in the middle of the road, you're going to get run over. Like, pick a side, pick an action, fail fast, forget the mistake, learn the lesson. Now, obviously, if you're a brain surgeon, I'm not giving you this type of advice, but, I think too many people.
Well, in your business, yes, maybe not in the surgery.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah, exactly. I think people focus on perfection, and I always, when I'm working with a client on whatever the new campaign is or whatever, I always tell them done is more profitable than perfect. Now, that doesn't mean you should put a substandard product out. I'm not saying lower the bar. I'm not saying make compromises, but at some point, if 80% gets you all the way there, it's better than trying to get that last, or let's say 90%, that last 10%. Yep. That you might spend a lot more time on it. It isn't necessary. I've invented so many products, and I've got patents and things. And I remember I was working on an all-terrain stroller with removable wheels and swivel front wheel and a brake. And it's a product now that I see in Costco. I won't tell you the whole story this time, but I spent $250,000 developing it. Went to my first trade show, sold $190,000, still upside down, but it was got a good start. And a year later, Costco came out with a product half my price at retail, and it was lower than my wholesale cost. Put me out of business. Now, their product was not as good as mine, but the marketplace didn't care. So even though I had flame retardant and ergonomic seating and all this extra stuff and quick release wheels, my product was better. But to solve the problem of the market, the parents who were buying that product didn't need to invest that extra money 3 times as much just to get the few of those tweaks. It's not like it wasn't worth it. So I learned the lesson a long time ago is, do they believe in you? Do they believe in the offer? And will they do the work? Right? So it's not always the best one that wins.
You bring up I love that conversation. I hear it so often where, people almost laugh at their competition. Their product sucks. We're so much better. It's like, yeah, but you think that. Does your customer think that?
Right, exactly. What's the mind of your customer?
Right. Voice of the customer is number one thing in building a successful business. You have to, they may, you may have as you had, right, bells and whistles. Maybe customers don't actually want that.
Or there's a disconnect in that I was doing a presentation to a bunch of community bankers, and they were trying to compete with the big banks and the Wells Fargo's, Bank of America's. And I was doing this presentation, and I asked for a volunteer, and I said, who feels like you're really successful? And this guy raised his hand. So I brought him up on stage and handed him a microphone. And I said, so tell me, why do people do business with you over your competition? And he said, well, of course, it's customer experience, customer service. We're all about customer service. And I said, oh, really? You're all about customer service? Yes, we're the leading customer service. Our net promoter scores are this. And he's going on. And so I grabbed my cell phone while I'm on stage, and I said, what's your phone number? And he goes, what are you doing? I said, no, what's your bank's phone number? So while I'm on stage, I dial his phone number. They answer the phone, and they said, hi, such and such bank. And I said, yes, I'm a new commercial customer in your area. I'd like to set up an account. What do you want? That was their first response. I said, I'm a new commercial customer, moved to your area. I'd like to set up an account. Oh, well, you got the wrong department. Let me transfer you. Transfers me to the next department. I sit on hold for 30 seconds. Now the CEO is getting pissed off, and I'm thinking, oh, well, this is what happens when you fly without a net. But so finally they transfer me. They don't ask me my name. I ask them, like, what are the rates? How should I pick which checking account I need? And they said, well, you can find all that information online, almost as if I was bothering them. And so So it goes on. You can tell how this goes. It goes on. I hang up, and everybody in the room is laughing at the CEO. This guy is mad. And I said to him, wouldn't you rather know now that there's a disconnect between what you think and what's happening to your customers? Now you have an opportunity to fix it. I wasn't trying to call him out or make him look stupid or pick on him. I wanted him to understand how easy it was to test, is it really in alignment or congruent with what he thinks? Now, fast forward, I rebuilt his digital footprint. He became a close friend of mine. I've stayed at his house. I know his kids. Like, we became great friends, but he had to get over that first opinion of the delusionment of everything is perfect. They are good. They were a great bank, but they really weren't delivering the customer experience because the people on the front line weren't getting the support and the training they needed. So yes, they had great products and services and low interest rates and good loan demand, but they didn't understand. And so for any business out there, you should mystery shop yourself. Call your own phone number, look at yourself online, Google yourself, see what shows up and see, is it congruent with what you're trying to say? I mean, I have people who want to get on my show. They'll say like, oh, I'd be a great guest. And I go, look, and this show doesn't have millions of views. I'm not Lewis Howes who has millions of downloads, right? I'm very targeted in franchising and business growth in the areas that I'm in. But I go look at these guests and they have no YouTube channel. They have, 32 people connections on LinkedIn. And I'm like, I'd love it. You might be a really smart person, but I'm also looking for influencers that can at least promote the show and at least be an interesting guest. And so it's always hard to vet it, but there's I think that the society, social media environment, the media has conditioned people to think it's get rich quick. And there really are no overnight successes. I mean, there's an overnight success when you trained forever, right? I mean, for me, I remember when I was younger, I was 27 years old. I worked for a corporation. My only corporate job I ever had. I was the senior buyer for data processing in a corporation. Had to wear a suit every day. It was back in the late 70s, early 80s. And I remember thinking, if I can just make as much money as I am old, like at 27, I made $27,000. And I'm like, I am rich. I'm making so much money. And then I got into business and I told you a story about the million. And I started realizing that it's not hard to make money. It's hard to manage it and to keep it. Like you said, the financial management part of it. So I've been a serial entrepreneur. I haven't gone bankrupt, but I've certainly had businesses that I let close down and that didn't work. And what I've learned is, add value, make a profit. You don't go broke. You can't make it up on selling it below cost. Like if you have a very small margin, you can't really make it up on volume in most cases. There's increased competition from the outside and internal competition. There's always going to be a challenge. I've had employees embezzle from me. I've had people steal my ideas. I mean, you name it. As an entrepreneur, you've seen it. And it really comes down to, at the end of the day, taking personal responsibility for my decisions and, most importantly, my indecisions. And I actually have that in my consulting program at ProfitRichResults.com. When they go to consulting and they look at the agreement, there's a clause that says, entering into this covenant that you agree to your actions and inactions, your performance and your results, because I want them to take personal accountability. I'm responsible to them, but I'm not doing it for them. Right. So I know it's a long road to a tiny house, but I'm certainly, that's where I've found that I have to just be a continual learner and be open-minded.
But you just kind of said it without saying it as well, is despite all of that, you just kept going. You kept
and you have to
going.
Yeah. What I do with my risk tolerance, my wife right now, she owns her own business. She's an entrepreneur. She doesn't have any employees. She's been successful in what she does. She's applied as instructor and certifies other instructors and has her own studio, but she won't hire any help. I mean, I've tried to get her to use a virtual assistant to do booking. And I mean, she's getting to the point where she'd rather do it herself. And I'm like, she's stuck at that level, right? I mean, she's just, and until that person, it's like you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink until she says, okay, I want to try a different thing. Now, she has tried in the past. I'm not talking bad about her. She's tried to hire people in the past, but they weren't the right people. So she failed. And then now she has it's kind of like marriage. Just because you had a bad marriage doesn't mean that all marriages are bad, right? Just because you didn't have a great business doesn't mean that all business is bad. So anyway, I know we're kind of getting off track there, but I agree. You got to keep going. You got to be willing to be resilient and pick yourself up. And like I say, forget the mistake, learn the lesson, and no means next.
Exactly. And resilience, I love that word. It's one of my favorites. Resilience comes from building a thicker skin, and the thicker skin comes from basically, having to hit the pavement multiple times and, dusting yourself off and getting up and get going. And once you do that, and, to my wives, my wives comes from an entrepreneurial family. She's come from nothing. parents built one of the most successful, jeans brands in Australia, went back to nothing. And so she's seen that whole roller coaster, and she's seen, when we got married, I seemed to be, on the up, and then went crashing down and was nearly bankrupt, multiple times, and then sold the company and yada yada yada. As you know, right, the journey goes, and that she always says, like, how do you just keep going? How do you just keep going? Like when things like seem completely, impossible, you just keep going, and somehow just turn it from impossible to possible. And the interesting thing is as well, that's one thing I've experienced. I'm keen to hear if you have a similar, with so many businesses you've had, you have a similar feeling. You forget the pain. Like I find myself going, I remember that it hurt. I remember that emotionally I thought the world was ending around me, but I don't feel it anymore. It's like, I don't remember, because obviously you really want to remember the lessons, but I don't remember like just how bad it was. Like that pain of going through it diminishes, and you just keep going. And because there's just so many of these roadblocks that you've had to go through, I find myself knowing, even like going through hardship, like let's say in the last couple of weeks, there's a couple of things I was dealing with that was quite difficult in one of my businesses, and I was stressed out in some ways, but in other ways I'm like, but I've been through so much worse before. This is nothing. Why am I stressed? Why is this getting to me? And I think that resilience is built through repetition, and not just the game. I mean, that's one of the ways.
Sure.
But taking, at some point, as you said, you have to make decisions. You have to own those decisions. You have to fail. I love failing fast. The whole fail fast concept, one of my favorites, right? You have to fail fast. You have to learn from it and just keep going. The more repetitions you build behind yourself, this thicker your skin gets, the more resilient you become, the bigger the probability of your success. It doesn't guarantee it. Nothing guarantees it, but it certainly increases your probabilities.
Yeah, and I have a great success library. I have audiobooks and Kindle books and physical books behind me. I have, mentors. I have EO. I have ChatGPT is the mentor now. Can be a life coach. And what I've learned is, there's an old quote by American President Teddy Roosevelt who said, I'm not going to quote the exact quote, but people have heard it, that the credit belongs to the man in the arena, and basically whose face is marred with sweat. And basically the thing is, I'd rather try something and fail than do nothing and succeed. Like I'd rather try it and fail. Like even being a keynote speaker, I didn't have a college degree at the time. I'm like, why is anyone going to listen to me? And now I speak to companies that have their people in the audience that make 100 times more than I do. And it's not about what I make, but I know what I know. Right. So I'm not trying to tell them everything, but I know my piece. I know that one thing. And I had to really overcome that. And I think that's where imposter syndrome comes into expertise, because it's like, why should I write a book on AI? There's 100 books on AI. Why should I write a book on leadership when it's been done millions of times, but no one's done it with my stories and my way and made it timely, topical, and relevant. And I always thought about it. It's like music. Why would a singer ever create a love song? Well, it's because we get tired of the old song. We want a new song. And so it's the same thing with movies. I mean, look at the movies. Every movie has the orphan is the hero, and the villain is the rich guy, right? I mean, you name a movie. I don't even care what movie it is. You'll never find the orphan is the villain and the rich guy is the victim. Like, it just doesn't happen, because that's not what society does. It's not the hero's journey. So as we get ready to wrap up this episode, I hope everybody has taken some good key points away. We do go live on Wednesdays at 11 a.m. Central on LinkedIn, YouTube, and Facebook. And we've been talking to Igor Vainshtein. If I'm probably pronouncing the name wrong, it's a tough name. Russian is cool. But you can find him. I'm going to spell it. Igor, that's his first name, last name, Vainstein, or just Google him. You'll find him. And then look for his game. If you're interested in working with him, I'll, obviously check him out on LinkedIn, put some notes in the show notes. He'll be reviewing those too. Any closing thoughts before we end?
We kind of, you said it, I was going to make a point about it, but we went down a different path. But I love the idea of, when you're looking for someone, one of my mentors, Carolyn, amazing woman, she has this phrase. She says, good people leave a trace.
Yep.
And you just Google me, and I actually I do that a lot as well. I'm saying just Google me. It's easier. And I think it's a good lesson also for you and I. We talked about LinkedIn and a lot of AI, and obviously I use a lot of that, and I have a great team that creates a lot of AI generated content and all of that. But I think closing thoughts is go leave some good traces around. And have fun doing it, and that's what I'm trying to do. And I'm quite active on LinkedIn. So for any of you viewers or listeners that want to get in touch, obviously LinkedIn is a great way, and my website. And again, just reiterating that I am on a mission to donate over 1,000 of these games. So if you have someone you want to nominate, please reach out to me. And I thank you.
That is so great. Well, thank you so much for being a guest today.
Thanks for having me, Ford. It's been fun, and I'm sure we'll chat again very soon.
Thank you for tuning in to Fortify Live. Make sure to like, comment, and share this episode on your favorite social media platform. And don't forget to subscribe to the Business Growth Show podcast, available wherever you get your podcast streaming fix. We air weekly at 11 a.m. Central Time. So until next week, keep pushing the boundaries and never stop growing.